Welcome to Abandoned Albums, the documentary podcast. Each week, our intrepid group of researchers and music archivists dig through the record crates of the world, finding those albums that may have been lost over time. If a new artist is discovered along the way, that's all the better. Using a patent-pending algorithm and spirited debate, we pick one album to discuss. Once that is settled, we will invite the artists to Thunderlove Studio to chat with your host, Keith R. Higgins. When we're lucky, they say yes. Our mission with Abandoned Albums is simple: to make sure artists' recorded work remains, or in some cases, lands on, the cultural radar. We invite you to sit back and relax. Thank you for joining us.
Sometimes it's nice to get together with another music cohort under the auspices of doing something grand. And so it was when I asked Professor Terry Barr on the show to talk about, in the pantheon of rock and roll lyricists, why it is that Jeff Tweedy of Wilco will likely make it in, but Paul Westerberg of the Replacements will likely be outside sweeping the stairs. The imagery tracks, but it can be a little confounding as to why that may end up being the case. That's what Terry and I signed on to talk about. And we kind of did, as well as all sorts of other stuff. Check out the show notes with links to all of Terry's writing. Here's my conversation with Professor Terry Barr.
Hey, Troy.
Terry, you are a lifelong music fan.
True. I don't even know how it started. I just know that we didn't have a record player in my house, but my parents both were very musically inclined. My dad played clarinet. And whenever we would get in the car, particularly, the radio would go on and they'd listen to whatever standards would be played then. But once we did get a record player when I was about 9, then my dad would just go to all the budget Sears, Roebuck stores he could find, just bringing home records. And so I got exposed very quickly to a real breadth of music, whether it's Dixieland or swing or Herb Alpert or Elvis or Frank Sinatra. And then I just so starkly remember when they joined the Columbia Record Club and bought me my first album, Paul Revere and the Raiders' Midnight Ride, my very first album.
Wow.
I was so excited.
Do you still have it?
I do. Yeah, it's such a treasure.
I'm going to give me 1 second. I want to show you one of the first records I bought.
Okay.
Now, I know this is an audio podcast, so those people listening won't understand. But one of the first records I purchased was Elton John's Greatest Hits Volume 1. I loved Elton John. I loved Elton John when I was a kid. And on the cover, I'll take a snapshot for those. I wrote, "Yeah, you are my favorite person."
And how old would you have been then?
25. No, I was 7 or 8.
Oh, man.
Anatomically contoured to gently support and cushion the weight of a woman's breasts.
You are a professor of what and where?
I am a professor of English in the general sense of that. My specialties were in the deep past, modern novel, the modern period, and film studies. But I teach at Presbyterian College in a really tiny place in South Carolina. I live in Greenville, which everyone wants to move to, and let me discourage you from doing that. Not you particularly. I would love to have you, but so I've taught at Presbyterian since 1987, and the great thing about a liberal arts college is you can come there hired to teach a few things, and since everything is so small, you can reinvent yourself and the courses that you want to teach. And so I have taught everything from Holocaust studies to courses in media itself to creative nonfiction, which I started doing about 12 years ago in Love, which helped my writing. And I've team talk courses in SEC football, the religion and the media of SEC football, and documenting history, a documentary film class. But to our purpose, it occurred to me a couple of years ago that there's such a wealth of literature on rock and soul music, both fiction and nonfiction. Why not teach a course on that? And so that's what I'm doing now, and I'm about to start a new semester of it.
Do you have to formally pitch the program or the class to the powers that be, or do they let you have free rein?
Not at first. I mean, if your department's okay with it, you're generally fine. And my department wants you to teach whatever you want to teach. But there's a special topics way to teach a course, I think 3 times without any real approval other than your department. But if you want the course to be a permanent part of the curriculum, then it has to go through academic affairs and the quote unquote curriculum committee that wants to know every single detail about what you're going to do, including what percentage the final exam will count. And I mean, they want to see all the reading lists as if they're going to know what you're talking about. But nevertheless, they want everything done, and I'm too close to retirement to worry about that. This is the only second time I'm teaching this course, and I think maybe I can do it one more time before I'm out of there.
Awesome. Today we're going to talk about 2 songwriters Terry and I both love. It will come as a shock to no one listening who mine is. The reason for the discussion, dear listener, is I am convinced one songwriter will make it into the pantheon of Hall of Fame and all the accolades that come with it, while the other one will not. And those 2 songwriters we're going to talk about are Jeff Tweedy of Wilco and Paul Westerberg of The Replacements and solo work. I don't think Paul Westerberg will make it into the pantheon. I'm not exactly sure why. Terry and I are going to try to unpack that a little bit. I don't suspect we'll get an answer, but who knows? That being said, would you agree with that statement, Terry?
I would agree with it. I would agree with it. I would agree with all tenets of that statement. It will be too bad if Paul Westerberg doesn't make it, but if he does make it, I will be shocked.
Now, Bob Dylan is taught in colleges. I read earlier this year there's now a Taylor Swift class being taught somewhere. The Beatles, obviously. All 3 of those I can see because they have a deep impact across culture. It's not just music. Their footprint is profound. The same cannot be said. Leonard Cohen is probably somebody who is studied, but his footprint is
definitely.
Yeah. What do you think the criteria might be for a songwriter to end up being studied at an academic level?
Well, you would think the test of time. To me, that would be the first response. However, one of the reasons I love music so much is that I had some incredible teachers who taught music way back. I can remember in the 6th grade, which would have been, I'm going to say 1967, one of my teachers who had just come out of school, she was 23 years old, which is just so frightening to think when I think about it. But she came to class one day and she could not stop talking about the song She's Leaving Home on Sgt. Pepper. And she printed out the lyrics for us to look at. She played the song. She even allowed us in the coming week to bring in our favorite songs.
Wow.
And I don't think we were articulate enough to talk about the lyrics of the song and what made them aspire to poetry. But I remember her talking about the lyrics of She's Leaving Home and how I can only imagine how it spoke to her as a young woman who had basically left home and who had gotten married at that age too. And you could just see in her face and hear in the tone of her voice what that song meant to her. And so that's the first moment for me where I understood that these aren't just pop songs. I couldn't have described it any better, but I understood that the lyrics of these songs, like a good poem will hit you on such an emotional level. And then you can start intellectualizing a little bit more about why. So that song and Leonard Cohen, as you mentioned, Suzanne and Bird on a Wire, I remember seeing in high school text a couple of Bob Dylan songs and Pete Seeger, things like that.
This will not come as a shock, I don't think, to you, but I had a complete polar opposite experience, a very Westerbergian experience, if you will. In the 2nd grade, we were encouraged to bring in music. I brought in The Who, Who's Next.
Oh my God, one of my favorite albums of all time.
Well, not the teachers. I brought it to her and she's like, we're not going to play this. This is rock and roll. We don't play that here. And I'm like, I'm like, well, if the adults don't like it, obviously it piqued my interest. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, this must be good if she doesn't like it because I don't like her.
And what year would that have been?
That would have been 2nd grade, somebody's 7 or 8. That would have been 75, 76, 75.
Well, it's such a strange thing that another great book that I just read was by Susan Rogers, who is a neuroscientist, and her book is Why We Listen to This, I think it's called, and basically why we love the music we love. And fantastic book. It breaks music down in a way that a layman like me can understand. And she gives you songs. You can go on her website and listen to the song, and she just goes through where your sweet spot is as a listener. But all that being said, she argues that what we hear when we're a kid really stays with us and tempers what we're going to like later on. And so I wrote a piece on Medium about when I was in the 1st grade, our music teacher played us great symphony conductors over and over again. Her favorite was Tchaikovsky. And I know that she played over and over again these wonderful overtures and symphonies full of lush strings and, just the movements, which I didn't understand at all, of course, in 1st grade. But something must have happened to me. One of the earliest bands I loved when I was an adolescent was Buffalo Springfield. And what I really loved were the Neil Young songs. And what I really loved in the Neil Young songs were the strange songs like Broken Arrow and Expecting to Fly, which if you listen to them with those Jack Nitzsche orchestrations are just as lush as the kind of lushness I felt as a kid in listening to Tchaikovsky. And so I kind of went further out and said, one of the reasons why the artist who calls himself Washed Out appealed so much to me, I think, is because that music reminded me of those Buffalo Springfield songs, which then, of course, made me go back to think some of the earliest music that I was exposed to was great symphony classic conductors. I don't listen to classical music. I can't appreciate it, but I know that I was moved as a kid by it in some way.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'll be honest with you when it comes to Wilco and Jeff Tweedy. I love Uncle Tupelo. I think it was the energy between Jay Farrar and Jeff Tweedy that just worked for me. And those first two, AM and Being There, are really good records.
Everything we do is based on the Replacements. It's okay.
Truthfully, Terry, I don't get Jeff Tweedy. I get him a little bit more now, and I'm not going to make any friends by saying this, but I get him a little bit more now that Jay Bennett isn't there. Mm-hmm. His lyrics seem to be a little bit much more concise. Mm-hmm. There actually seems to be a narrative of some kind, which is important to me as a listener. Yeah. So I don't get him. I don't get Tweedy. I don't get the deification of Jeff Tweedy.
I don't get the deification for sure, because as much as I really like Wilco, and since I knew we were going to talk, and as we began planning this, I got a little more obsessed with Wilco again, and I read Tweedy's books, and I came to understand Tweedy more than I ever thought I would. And I didn't even really try. I just listened to the music and liked what I liked and didn't what I didn't. But I see a little of myself in Tweedy, in that he grew up in such a dysfunctional home. While his father could be tender and could want to have some time with Jeff, was basically aloof and was a typical man in some ways, that, I mean, this is my kid, and just whatever, let's go to the bar. And I believe his father was alcoholic, and his mother, he said the other day that in something that I read, that one of his great ambitions as a kid was to play a song for his mother that he really liked and felt vulnerable listening to, hoping that she would like it too and would understand him better. And when I read that, I thought, shit, that's what I did all the time. Yeah. Hey, listen to this song. I still do it with my wife and my daughters. Listen to this song, and it's as if you understand the song, you'll get me more than anything else. And I understand that Tweedy as, in some ways, a really misfit, a person who's really uncomfortable in his own skin and has all sorts of problems, social problems and whatever. I think that to come as far as he does and to be as open in some of his songs as he is just such a major accomplishment for him. And it makes me want to know him more.
Wow.
The one other story I just want to tell briefly is how I came to love Wilco in the way that I did. And it was right after they did those Mermaid Avenue records, right, where they found the Woody Guthrie lyrics and put them to music. And so they played at a festival in Raleigh, North Carolina. They were one of the opening bands. And I went with a couple of friends. And, I'd listened to a little bit of Being There. And I think by that point, Summer Teeth was out. But I didn't give them a whole lot of attention. And so I sat there, and it was one of the only kind of unknown to me bands, or maybe bands in general. Jason Isbell falls into this category too. I could have sat there for 3 days listening. Really? Because, and I can't explain why, other than the music just got right inside of me. And I thought, yeah, I don't know why, just yeah. And I just kept listening to it. And when they ended, no one else who played that day, and Lyle Lovett played, and Joan Baez played, and I don't even know who else played, but no one came up to Wilco.
Wow.
And so that did it. I think California Days, that Woody Guthrie song that they did, just something I listened to that and thought, this is a groove that works so deeply inside of me that I feel like that I'm perfectly in sync with this band.
Isn't that one of the most exciting things when you find a band and you realize it's opening Pandora's box? It's a whole new journey that you're about to go on when you find somebody, as I did with the Replacements, where they resonate with you.
Yeah.
For who knows why. The line that got me for the Replacements, I was living in New York at the time, and she'd come out. We went to go see U2, and I was taking her back to the airport, and her hook to get me onto the Replacements was, I'm going to play the Replacements. This album has horns on it, and it was Pleased to Meet Me. I'm like, I don't know why that was the hook, but the line that got me was, Jesus rides beside me, he never buys any smokes. And it just struck me dumb. I was like, wow.
That's a great line. Yeah.
It really is. I mean,
yeah.
The imagery, and the fact that it's probably true.
Yeah.
You know he's bumming smokes from you.
Yeah. Well, that is what we look for. And to go back to why do songs make it and why do they get into syllabi, people like us, I think the imagery is really at the core for me. So one of the Replacement songs, and I think you can correct me because you know them better than I do, I think it's on Pleased to Meet Me, is Skyway.
The Skyway, high above the busy little one-way. In my stupid hat and gloves at night, I lie awake, wondering if I'll sleep, wondering if we'll meet out in the street. Would you take the Skyway? It don't move at all like a subway. It's got bums when it's cold like any other place. It's warm up inside, sitting down and waiting for a ride beneath the Skyway.
This is how things sync up so well. My wife and I were watching the TV series of High Fidelity, and it came out a few years ago, but we never watched it. And so we're getting close to the end, and I just can't believe it wasn't renewed, but whatever. And so in the episode we watched last night, they did 2 Replacement songs. One was Rattlesnake, which went right over my head, but then they got to Skyway, and I could see, because we have closed caption on, that before it even started, Replacement song, Skyway, and I listened to it, and I listened to it again today, and it might be my favorite Replacement song now that I finally listened to it. But if it is, it's because of the imagery that is so carefully constructed. It's not profound in a T.S. Eliot way, but it is, you see it so clearly, and the song is meaningful, the narrative is right there. It is, to me, a perfectly constructed lyric song, and the music matches up perfectly with it.
You mentioned the T.S. Eliot, and I wrote out all the lyrics. And I think this is something that Jeff Tweedy did on Either Way.
Maybe the sun will shine today. The clouds will blow away. Maybe I won't feel so afraid. I will try to understand. Either way.
That's just as tight of a song for me. That's that record. That's Sky Blue Sky, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That
First song
record
on it.
That record is the one record that I would listen to by Wilco repeatedly.
Well, as you say that, when I re-listened to Either Way, I so clearly heard the replacement. And maybe because I just listened to Skyway and just thought, okay, here's they have sound associations for me, for sure. And I do love that album. And one of the other songs I love is one of the closing songs, On and On and On, which I wrote about in thinking about one of my best friends who passed away a few years ago, a sudden death, one of those horrible things. But apparently that song is Tweedy writing about his father.
It's the fastest radio station to find on the dial. Right down here at the very left, all by itself.
The song that has grown on me other than Skyway and that I really love is Left of the Dial.
Oh.
And I would love to hear your thoughts about Left of the Dial, because it spoke so deeply to me when I listened to it now several times.
It speaks to me on so many different levels because, one, it is about a girl, so that's kind of cool. But more than anything, especially now, is it captures that moment in time for me and you being an academic in the college world, when Left of the Dial, it meant something. It was where you went to find where you went to find your tribe, more or less. Yeah. That's what sticks with me the most, is that because all your college radio stations would be below 95 on the FM dial, typically, and Left of the Dial, and it did. You physically had to dial, and it just, the imagery is there. I think it's lost on a lot of people today, but the imagery is there, is actually turning it. And I was just discovering college radio as I discovered the replacements. And I'm like, oh wow, that's really smart. That double, that it's not a double entendre, but writing a song about longing for somebody and then finding them somewhere else. It speaks to, well, like I said, finding your tribe. Spoke to me that way. I don't know, man. It's just it.
Well, I totally agree with your interpretation of the song, and like you, we would take trips all over the place back then. I got married in 1984, and my wife and I traveled all up and down from DC down to Alabama a good bit. And wherever we went, I was always fooling around with that radio, trying to find the college station or some alternative station down there, if there were still such a thing as freeform. And it would be so frustrating to not, and then to have to revert back to what I used to like and go, oh shit, someone's going to be playing Taking Care of Business again. And that was a fine old song back when I was in high school, but it's no longer a fine old song. The other thing I think is fascinating, why we get obsessed with music and why we should never give up on something. One of my great loves, as I mentioned before, is Neil Young. And today, my favorite Neil Young record is Tonight's the Night. But when it first came out and I got it, a friend gave it to me for my birthday. We're all sitting around putting it on. And I don't know if we're expecting it to sound like Harvest or After the Gold Rush, but it so very much does not. And we could not listen to it. And I kept thinking, oh shit. And I never forgot it. And now they've reissued it and done it from the Roxy, where he's really stoned and drunk and just down. And I played it for my wife, who has really interesting taste. Like, she really likes Tom Waits. I would have never guessed that. But when she heard that record, she said, that is so good. And I thought, there is definitely more to you than I ever knew too. But it's become my favorite Neil Young record.
Do you think commercial success has anything to do with elevating an artist to that deified status that, and I'm not saying either of these guys are, but certainly people genuflect at both artists, Paul Westerberg and Jeff Tweedy.
Yeah.
But do you think commercial good Lord, commercial success plays a role?
I have no opinion on commercial sex, but yes, it does. And I've written about this before too. When I first saw REM, in 1981. They played in a little club, and there were 50 of us standing there. And my best friend that said, they're going to be so big, just wait. And he likened Michael Stipe to Elvis. And they kind of look alike, that little sneering lip. And he and I also went to see U2 in Knoxville, where we went to graduate school. And the only record U2 had out was Boy. And they were fronting the Jay Giles band. They were the opening act.
Wow.
And so he and I went to see U2, and we're standing in line waiting to get in, and everyone's talking about Jay Giles, and we run into someone, aren't you so excited to see Jay Giles? Well, we're actually here to see U2. And he said, well, who are they? And they put on such a great show that everyone loved them, but no one really knew them. And we really couldn't listen to Jay Giles, which is a fine band, but it was too different. The juxtaposition was too much. Yeah. And so now, of course, U2, snobs look down on that U2. They're just way too popular, and who are they? So it does matter sometimes, in it backfires. But yeah.
I tend to agree with you. I do think commercial success does play a role.
So has Wilco achieved commercial success, in your opinion?
Not if we judge commercial success by sales.
Right.
I think if you go to almost anyone with an above average knowledge of music, they will know who Wilco is. I don't think your average Taylor Swift fan would know, but I think anybody, and certainly over a certain age, not that it's ageism or ageist, but, I don't think.
Well, so one of my funny stories that's funny to me, maybe not to anyone else, is, of course, I've played music for my daughters, and they're both now, my younger daughter is going to turn 30. My older daughter is almost 34. So I've played them music all their lives. They love Johnny Cash. They love the Beatles, and they have helped me appreciate both Taylor Swift and one I love even better, Casey Musgraves, who is such a great storyteller, I think. And so we've had this wonderful reciprocal relationship where they know some things that maybe some of their contemporaries don't know. They can sing you all the lyrics to Tub Thumping. So there you go. I don't know what if that really helped them out in life or not, but they know what's going on. So
well, to be fair, it's not a very deep song.
It's not a very deep song, but it's catchy, right?
It sure is.
So one of my all-time favorite Wilco songs is that really short song, The Late Greats.
The greatest lost track of all time. The late greats, turpentine. You can't hear it on the radio. You can't hear it anywhere you go. The best band will never get signed. Cassette star and Butcher's Blind are so good you won't ever know. They never even played a show. You can't hear them on the radio. The greatest singer in rock and roll would have to be Romeo. His vocal cords are made of gold. He just looks a little too old.
It works for me on so many levels. I love short songs. I love tight short songs, which is maybe why I like some of the replacement songs. They're just 2 minutes and 30 seconds. We've said what we need to say. No point going any further because you can't beat this. I can think of Cream's Badge, another song that some people think it ends too soon, but no, it's perfect. So The Late Greats is that way for me. And I never know which version I like better, the one on A Ghost is Born or the one on Kicking Television, but it doesn't matter because I've played that so much that my older daughter adores that song. And that's probably the only thing she knows about Wilco. So if I mention Wilco, she goes, yeah, I love The Late Greats. And she isn't going to delve too far into that because she has her own stuff, but that's how she knows it. And I consider it a great victory. that, because I think that song is about everything that we find wistful and romantic and sad, and what we love about what we love, because we like what other people will never like. There are always people who will never make it, and on and on and on.
Interesting. I think there's something to be said for brevity. I think that takes a great deal of skill to write something that tight and that short. Much more skill. I'm looking at the lyrics right now to "She's a Jar."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is just, with all due respect to both Jay Bennett and Jeff Tweedy, it's just gibberish to me.
Let me get the lyrics back up.
Where, I know it's about a woman. Where's the story?
Yeah. Let me see if I can defend it just a little bit. I really like the opening metaphor, a jar with a heavy lid. And if you go into that a little bit, you understand, or at least I understand, that we don't know what she really is, but we know that dealing with her, and perhaps dealing with the writer or the persona here, is also going to be fraught with difficulty. He both of them who wrote it, obviously. And then they kind of deflect that with this pop quiz kid stuff and the sleepy kisser, but then that pretty war with feelings hid. So for me, it's just one of these, as well as I do, that for most men, it's just extremely difficult to understand women.
Yes.
I've been married for almost 40 years, and I do understand my wife to a great extent. But do I really understand her? She's got a book that she wants me to read about, I don't know what it's called now, what women think of men, or trying to understand women. And I'm going, man, and she's read me passages, and I think I'm very empathic. I think that I really want to work hard to understand not just my wife, but women. But I know that I fail all the time. Mm-hmm. And so when I hear this song, lines like, "She begs me not to miss her. She says forever to light a fuse. We could use a handful of wheel and a day off." I just think about how relationships are that fraught with, and now my wife just left for a weekend with my daughter, so I'm totally by myself for a couple of days. And you would think, oh, great, I can do whatever I want to do, but that's really not the way I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling like, oh shit, this is great today, but by tomorrow, what am I going to be doing? And so what am I trying to say here? I want my wife around, even if we're not quite gelling, even if she's listening to her stuff and I'm listening to my stuff. I miss her, even if we don't argue too much, but we have, like any other couple, those moments where, okay, can we talk about what just happened? Mm-hmm. And I'm always going, shit.
Yep.
But my wife, who is a psychotherapist, I will say.
Oh, Jesus.
I know.
That's hitting pay dirt right there.
It really is, because she has the skill and she plays so fairly to help me at least talk about what I'm feeling. And once I do that, as much as I don't want to, because I am a typical man in that respect, I do feel a whole lot better. And so I go through this song, and the images are coming at me, and I should have known what was happening here. When I see lines like "a bruised road," "tonight is real," "when I forget how to talk, I sing," "won't you please bring the flash," and all this stuff. When you get to the end, where he comes back to the line, "She begs me not to miss her," with "she begs me not to hit her," then of course what I understand is, like in so many relationships, the man loses the sense of being able to use words and does what that primitive part of us sadly does too often when we get frustrated and when we feel whatever it is that we're feeling. And I've never hit my wife. I would not want to hit my wife. I think I'm in control enough of myself never to do that. But, honestly, our passions reach a point sometimes where we're going, why can't you see the way I'm feeling? And yeah. So that's what that song does for me.
Yeah. That's probably my biggest, well, I don't like the song, but that last line does not, it's unacceptable. I will give it kudos for ending right afterwards. I do like that. That was a nice end. But man, and I don't.
It's rough. It's rough.
It really is rough. And I think if you can't control your feelings, and I've certainly had my issues with anger. Absolutely. I don't pretend to be fucking great at it, but I know when to walk away and let myself cool down.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
And I wish there were more people like us. There clearly are not. And I don't know what relationship they're talking about, and I haven't looked into it deeply enough, whose relationship, if it's real at all. But while I hate it, while I think it's rough, I'm glad it does end there too.
Yeah.
I think there are too many men who won't admit what they do, and they pretend that. We see it all the time. I've got a student who's just written about this. She's talking more about the preachers in her community and what they've done, and she sees it all in her writing, but she didn't know how to talk to anybody about it. And anyway, I in a weird way, it's kind of brave to do it, but the bravery is not outshone by the horror.
Right. On the opposite side, right, we have anything like Unsatisfied or Bastards, or even Go, which I didn't realize all these years. I didn't realize Go was a cover. Go is off Stink, the EP, and it's done a band called the Tough Darts. And who knew? I didn't know that till literally just a couple weeks ago.
I didn't know it till you told me.
But here's, the same sort of premise. You don't hit them, you walk away, go, I don't know.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I don't think you put this song on the list, but what do you think of Androgynous?
I didn't. I had no idea what androgyny was when I first heard that song. Not something I was exposed to. So I had to look it up in the dictionary, folks. There was no AI or Google back then. I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. And then listening to the lyrics, it continues to astound me at its depth, its progressiveness, its empathy. And I'm getting goosebumps as I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Comes Dick, he's wearing a skirt. Here comes Jane, she's sporting a chain. Same hair evolution, same build evolution. Tomorrow who's gonna fuss? And they love each other so. Androgynous, closer than you know. Love each other so. Androgynous.
its overall message is let people be.
Yeah.
And man, that's so simple, so smart, but that song never ceases to amaze me. And I remember being at a college bar, Alexander's in Dayton, Ohio. It was drink and drown night. Pay $5 to get in. You can drink all you want till midnight. Anyway, it was not very healthy. But in any event, I requested that song. That was the song I wanted to hear off of Let It Be. And of course, the DJ didn't play it because,
of course,
why would he? Not with 100 people around. But what do you think about it?
Well, my story with that song is it was the first replacement song that I loved. So I'll just start with that. And I put it on a mixtape and went over to a party at a friend's house. And, of course, we were all pretentious in our mixtapes to the degree that we were trying to impress somebody. I don't know who we were trying to impress, but we were hoping someone was going to walk in and say, who the fuck made this mixtape? You've got to come with me and we'll make your career. So I put it on the mixtape, and one of my friends, a good friend, just looked at me and said, how could you put that song on this? And who cares? Androgynous, it's horrible. And I wish that I'd had the fortitude at that moment to say, all right, do you not like the song as a song? And I knew what androgyny meant. Or are you somehow offended or put off by the whole concept of androgyny? And I don't know. He was an interesting guy, but I'm going to bet that he wanted things to be a lot more clear-cut, and he was threatened by androgyny and by a song called Androgynous that would even take us there.
Yeah.
I will always champion that song. It will always be the song by the Replacements I hold most dear because it was speaking to something that I realized was all around me, and that people just were sometimes androgynous. It wasn't like they had to cultivate the look. They just were.
Agreed.
And still are.
Yes. Have you ever? Joan Jett does a cover of it, which is quite amazing. But
oh shit! On what record?
If only there were a tool.
If only there were. And while you're looking for it, I will say that my granddaughter, who's barely 2 years old, is a tremendous Joan Jett fan.
What? That's incredible.
Yeah. It's because I keep playing Joan Jett for her, and it all started when someone said, "Oh, does she really cry all night? She's just getting a bad reputation." And of course, that just started it all off. So now whenever I put on Joan Jett, this little girl just starts rocking. And I consider that a great victory, of course.
Well, now you can play her Androgynous. It is on her albums Naked and Sinner. And this is interesting, and I think it's kind of cool. I'm reading right from Wikipedia, folks. In 2015, the song was covered by Joan Jett again, along with Laura Jane Grace of Against Me and Miley Cyrus for Cyrus's Backyard Sessions video series.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Have you read Tranny?
I haven't. I didn't. I always say that somehow my musical knowledge sort of really went into a coma around 2000. So I missed that whole decade of that kind of music. I turned my nose up at it. I was just being a jerk for no reason. But I read Dan Sellout. Book is called Sellout. Dan, I can't remember his last name.
Oh no, I don't remember.
Dan Ozzie.
Yeah.
Book's called Sellout, but there's a chapter in there about Against Me, and I'm like, oh, she is far more interesting than I.
Well, the book is incredible, and I have taught the book in both creative nonfiction and in American literature, and just dealing with memoir. It's an incredible memoir, and it's an incredible story. And I've seen those music videos that she does with Joan Jett and Miley Cyrus, which is, again, just something so fascinating. So I'm never one to write people off. So Miley Cyrus is wildly interesting because of how outrageous she is. And the more people talk about being put off by her, the more I kind of like her.
For sure. That's Androgynous. I mean, I just think it was such a great song. Are you teaching? I'm trying to find your syllabus right now. Are you teaching it?
No, I'm not teaching that. So what am I doing? I'm teaching David Mitchell's novel, Utopia Avenue, which is one of my favorite contemporary novels. So good. I'm doing A Visit from the Goon Squad, Jennifer Egan. I'm doing Kim Gordon's, what was it, A Member of the Band, I think, about Sonic Youth. And I am doing, Questlove's Music is History, which again, if you don't know it, man, what a book.
Really?
What a book. Yeah, what a book.
Okay.
It's a personal story, but it also takes you through the history of music from the earliest stage of his life. And he is so utterly fascinating. It's just a great read. And I think it speaks to so many different kinds of music. And I hope my students will appreciate how, again, broad his taste is and how it's possible to really do both a personal and a kind of critical study of music at the same time.
I love hearing you say the phrase creative nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
I've written a bunch of pieces that
I think you write creative nonfiction. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
and
exactly
I tried to
what
explain
you're
a
doing.
girl I was dating. She's like, did this happen? I'm like, no, that didn't happen. She goes, well, you wrote about it. I'm like, well, yeah. She goes, some of it's true. I'm like, yeah, it's creative nonfiction. She goes, that's not a thing. I said,
That's most definitely a thing.
it absolutely is a thing.
There's even a journal called Creative Nonfiction that's the most highfalutin journal in its field.
So I love hearing that. And that, I mean, Paul Westerberg and Jeff Tweedy, I would.
Yeah, they engage in it.
For sure.
So it's yeah, you are writing truth, and sometimes you have to take liberties. Sometimes maybe these two scenes were separate scenes, but you compress them because you don't have enough time to do that. Or maybe a character gets compressed, but it's still, as long as it's truth, as long as it did happen in some form and you're tinkering with it a little bit to make it what you want it to be, then that's the world we're in. And some people do a really good job with it. Some people, I guess, don't. Some people get it and some people don't. I love it. It spoke to what I wanted to write, and it allows you the freedom to write in a way just like you're writing fiction. You have characters, you have plot, you have all the literary devices at your disposal.
I'm a huge fan myself. I'm not a huge Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm glad it exists, and I'm glad the music gets its proper recognition. I think it's incredibly biased. I think it's incredibly white. I think it's incredibly silly. I think it's incredibly foolish.
Yes.
When it comes, I know the replacements have been on the ballot, never got in. Has Wilco?
Wow, I don't keep up. My guess is no, but I really don't keep up. I tuned in to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame show the other night just in time to see Willie Nelson. And that's all I watched. And I saw Willie Nelson for the first time back in September and was, just so happy I went to see him. But I didn't want, I think they said the next act, I forget who they said the next act coming up was, but I just thought, nope, not doing that. If it had been the replacements, I would have stayed tuned, or Wilco.
It's interesting.
Well, the Hall of Fame, any Hall of Fame has, so I'm a baseball fan, or I used to be a baseball fan. I was a Yankees fan. And when Derek Jeter came up for the Hall of Fame, the first time he came up, of course he got in, but he was not a unanimous election. Who's voting against Derek Jeter? and why? What the fuck about his career didn't you like? And I thought, at that point, why does any of this matter? If you're going to play that stupid game, why does it matter? And I think that way, even though, like you, I'm glad they exist, but
one reason I find the Hall of Fame's foolish is that the Goo Goo Dolls will probably make it in. And when I say to people that the Replacements are my favorite band, they're like, oh, I've never heard of them. I'm like, you heard of the Goo Goo Dolls? Yeah. Well, that should have been the Replacements.
Yeah.
And that's no slam. That's no slight against Johnny Resnick or any of the other guys.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine. You know, Paul Westerberg produced a record for them and wrote a song for them. So, you know, obviously there's some camaraderie there, but
I think you would like the Hall of Fame to be more critically based as opposed to something like the People's Choice Awards.
100%.
Okay, yeah, you get, okay, that's fine, the People's Choice Awards, but there needs to, I don't know what the criteria are to make it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Aren't there some? Shouldn't there be some? And if, what are they?
At the end of the day, Dr. Barr,
Yes.
we fast forward and we look at that pantheon of songwriters. I'm trying to visualize it in my head, like that Greek pantheon. And I see Jeff Tweedy in there, but I see Paul Westerberg hanging around the steps, you know?
I do too.
And that, fair or unfair? I think, I obviously I'm going to say it's unfair, but I think, or I feel that speaks to the silliness of them, of a pantheon.
Well, it does. And again, what I would say is that with enough time, people who were underestimated or underappreciated often find themselves finally getting their due. It works that way in literature for sure. People who you just were not included in the big names of 20th century literature or 19th century literature. Now whole seminars are devoted to them. If you can imagine taking an Edith Wharton or Willa Cather seminar, those things do happen, and they wouldn't have happened even when I was coming through school. These are people you'd read a short story by. Yeah. Just to represent, you know, a woman writing at this point. So I think the same could be true. I would hope if it is, as you say, Paul Westerberg is only hanging around on the steps, one day someone will realize that if there has to be a Hall of Fame, this guy needs to be in it. If we're really looking at people whose career and songs changed lives because of the time they lived in and how they were breaking some of the genres and getting us to think in a different way, then sure. Yeah.
There is no doubt that Paul Westerberg and the Replacements changed my life. They certainly made it all the more rich.
Yeah.
The songs.
Yeah.
The literature question, if there was a literary equivalent, this is on the spot, a literary equivalent of Jeff Tweedy and Paul Westerberg to you, who might that be?
Of the relationship between the two?
Yeah, like who would be? Yeah.
That's a really good question. I can think of the ones who are more famous in the Tweedy mold of getting accolades. But trying to think of comparison. Well, so okay, Philip Roth. Let's say he would be the Tweedy figure in this scenario. Oh my God,
100%.
You're recording this, so okay. So he would be that figure. Someone like Paul Auster, or even someone even more obscure like Steve Stern might be the Paul Westerberg. Someone who's written some really good stuff, or Michael Chabon, even, I guess. Maybe Michael Chabon has gotten, but Michael Chabon wrote a couple of great novels, and then to me, some pretty mediocre novels. So, but yeah, that could be it. And I love Philip Roth. He's, again, I just disassociate who the man is from the literature, and I know I can't always do that. I think he had some, of course, reprehensible episodes of his life, but his prose just kills me in so many novels.
This is a great way to, I've never got Philip Roth. This is a great circle back to the beginning of the conversation because, and I asked this recently, I interviewed Joel Selvin about his upcoming book about Jim Gordon, the drummer. Mm-hmm. And is there a point where we separate the man from the art? And I mean, you mentioned earlier, I forget who the artist was, but the 13-year-olds. Jimmy Page openly dated a 13-year-old with the consent of their parents. Fine. That still doesn't make it okay.
No.
You know?
I think each of us has to make this decision as we deal with the ones we like. And I've got a friend who will never listen to Jackson Browne because of, and I know that episode has been challenged with Daryl Hannah. And I understand her point of view, and I don't feel good about it. And I don't like all of Jackson Browne. I like the first 3 records quite a lot.
Yeah.
And then after that, he just becomes, someone else. But it's a struggle. It's a real struggle. I don't go back to watch. I still might watch an old Woody Allen movie here and there, but I've quit going to Woody Allen movies. I don't think he's making any more now. And, you just have to make your own decision and maybe have to defend that decision.
For me, it's Ryan Adams. I will not. I will still listen to Whiskeytown Stranger's Almanac because I think that is actually just a perfect record. However, any of his solo stuff, I can't listen to it because I don't understand how you are acutely aware of what you're doing and you're still doing it.
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
It is fucked up.
I don't approve of that.
Totally.
Last question for you. If you had an abandoned album, it can't be the Neil Young one you wrote about. What might that be?
Shoot. All right, my head is just going through so many. Let me see. Oh, okay. Al Cooper's Easy Does It.
Well done. Well played.
Somehow it got away from me, but I had a copy I got in a Wilco, which used to be like a Zayre, which used to be like Walmart. And it was in the cutout bin for $1. And I thought, okay, double record set. I loved it. I don't know what happened to it, but yeah, that's my choice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right, Terry. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
All right. You too, Keith.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Many thanks to Professor Barr for taking the time to chat with us. In the show notes section, we've included links to everything mentioned in the podcast, as well as links to Terry's work on Medium and Substack.
This episode of Abandoned Albums was written and produced by Keith R. Higgins. The show was recorded at Thunderlove Studio, where it was engineered by
Daphne Morris,
with help from
Penetration.
Abandoned Albums was edited by
Vic Titball,
with help from
Clem Fandango.
At the beginning of this podcast, you were treated to a diverse selection of music, including the soulful sounds of Forever by Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul, the indie vibes of Velvet Roof by Buffalo Tom, and the raw energy of Nevermind by The Replacements. Our theme song is Kiss the Earth by The Renegades. You can stream all of these artists wherever you stream your favorite music. You heard the following songs during this podcast: Spiders, Kidsmoke by Wilco, and Wilco covering The Replacements' Color Me Impressed. You also heard Skyway by The Replacements and Either Way and The Late Greats, both by Wilco. And lastly, you heard Go and Androgynous by The Replacements. You can easily access the music of Wilco, The Replacements, and the solo works of Jeff Tweedy and Paul Westerberg on your favorite streaming platforms. Please remember to support independent music.
Original music by Mike Pellegrino.
If you like what you've heard, please remember to subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps other people find the podcast. Thanks for listening.
Grazie.
Bailey Leaf,
Rob Janicki, Mike Pellegrino, Thurina Bella,
Eric Beatner, S.W. Loudon, Ronnie Barnett,
Michael Janicki, Peyton Janicki.
This show's executive producer is Lulu McGillicuddy and is in the loving memory of
Rufus Thunderwelch.
Abandoned Albums receives funding from Damon Pharmaceuticals, the makers of Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck is the only chewable tablet made to combat stomach unease associated with mediocrity. Taken daily, Ben Affleck can help combat explosive gastrointestinal shame. You can find a multitude of flavors in the incontinence section of your local pharmacy. Ben Affleck, save yourself the embarrassment.
The side effects include dry mouth, headache, anal leakage, muscle soreness, bad decisions, gender confusion, constipation, evil spirit possession, and banality. Use only as directed.
And now, until we meet again next time, I remain as always obediently yours.
Abandoned Albums is a production of Paw Print Media.